This video of taking the fork is the converse to the previous video of avoiding the fork. Consequently, there's some similarities. However, there are additional points that we're going to highlight as well. In the first animation, we see the driver of the red vehicle deciding at the last moment that he needs to take the fork, cutting across the path of the green vehicle and resulting in a collision. Real life clip of this. However, in this particular clip, there's no contact or collision with the camera's vehicle, but the point that I want to demonstrate is that when a driver realizes at the last second that he or she needs to take a different turning, take the fork in this case, they're prepared to carry out a rash maneuver, a radical turn. So have a look at the driver ahead and see what the outcome is of such a maneuver. Total disaster. Fortunately, there were no other vehicles involved. In this animation, it's not so much the driver wanting to change direction at the last second, but perhaps wanting to get ahead of a slower moving lane of traffic, tries to beat the traffic, and just before the fork decides that he wants to cut into the lane of traffic. Real life clip of this. So we have a driver approaching in the right hand lane, wanting to take the fork ahead, and there could be two options to this scenario. So we see he's indicating wanting to pull across. Now the camera could easily hold back a little bit to allow him the space in order to be able to pull him, but the camera is persistent, not wanting to give him a gap. So at this point, the driver of this vehicle, realizing that the camera is not going to give way, could rather have taken the island, given himself a little bit more space, ridden down the left side of the island with his indicator on, had a look at the traffic behind the camera and trying to see whether he can get a gap. But neither wants to give way, and so this is the outcome. This animation is showing what we've seen previously with the vehicle wanting to take the fork or avoid the fork as in the previous video. But what I want to demonstrate once again is that when you're approaching the fork, such as this green vehicle is, then it's better not to approach the fork traveling in the inner lane, because then you stand the risk of a vehicle wanting to cut across your path in order to take the fork, as we'll see happens in the animation. But rather, if circumstances allow, when approaching a fork, be in the outer lane. So had this green vehicle been in the left-hand lane, there would be no risk of any vehicles to the left of him wanting to take the fork. So bear that in mind. If circumstances allow, try not to be on the inner lane when taking a fork. Real life clip demonstrating this. Camera's traveling on the inner lane, approaching the fork. So he has a driver to the left of him, realizing at the last second he needs to cut across. In this case, there is collision with a bit of a disastrous or negative outcome. What this animation is demonstrating is that when you in the same lane as a vehicle ahead who realizes at the last second that he needs to change direction, he may need to slow down quite radically in order to be able to make the change in direction. So traveling behind him, you've got to be alert. having allowed enough space ahead of you to create a bit of a buffer zone in order to slow down, which is exactly what we see in the animation here. The driver of the green vehicle is alert and manages to slow down in time. But that could easily not have been the case had the driver behind the red vehicle not been alert or been traveling and approaching at a much higher speed, and so could easily have rear-ended the red vehicle. Real-life demonstration of this. So the driver of this vehicle realizes at the last second he actually needs to take the fork, and so slows down quite radically. Let's progress the video to that point. Indicates and now wants to pull across. Doesn't really check his rear view mirror, so you'll see as the video advances that two vehicles just manage to scrape by ahead of him as he's taking the turn. So the lesson there is just to be alert of what's going on ahead of you. We've got a separate page where we deal with following distance, and so it's always good to have that buffer zone in case somebody carries out such a rash maneuver. The last clip is a vehicle traveling at a fair speed down the left-hand lane, also at the last moment wanting to take the fork, squeeze in the gap between the camera and the fork. And because of the speed and the tight turn that the driver has to take, so there's a high angle of attack. Now, what do I mean by angle of attack? Well, I have a separate page on the website dealing with angle of attack that will explain what this actually is. But when there's a high angle of attack, then there's a great chance that the vehicle is induced into a slide with disastrous outcomes. So this is similar to the very first real-life clip that we watched, where the driver likewise had a high angle of attack. His car went into a bit of a slide, he overcorrected, disastrous outcome. So there is a web page on that, and I'll put the link to that web page, which is explaining this angle of attack, that you can have a look at if you want to. So we just have a look at the outcome, overcorrects, and disastrous outcome. Fortunately, the pedestrians were also alert and so avoided any danger. please like, subscribe, and get notified.